welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into something we're seeing everywhere, really. It's this phenomenon of teenagers using social media, TikTok, Reddit, Instagram, you name it, to explore, and sometimes, well, self-diagnosed conditions like ADHD. It's dynamic, it's complex, and honestly, it's incredibly relevant. Affects families, schools, mental health professionals, everyone.
It really is. You see these, short videos, super engaging, describing things like a mind that just won't quiet down or struggles with focus, maybe that intense reaction to rejection.
Right.
And the captions, they just hit home. I thought I was lazy. Maybe it's ADHD, or do these 5 things. You might have undiagnosed ADHD.
Yeah.
And for a lot of young people, these aren't just like random clips. They feel like reflections of their own inner world. It gives them a new way to think about their struggles.
And that's exactly what we want to unpack today. The big question, I think, for this deep dive is why? Why are so many young people scrolling online for these answers? And what's it telling us about their mental health, about the digital world they live in, and maybe, crucially, how society is or maybe isn't meeting their needs? So this chat is really designed to help you, listening, get a quick but thorough insight into this. We want to offer different angles, maybe spark some aha moments, but without, overloading you. So let's start with, why now? What's going on?
It's fascinating, isn't it, how these platforms have almost become these huge informal psychology classrooms, kind of accidentally. You've got ADHD influencers, many diagnosed recently, or even self-diagnosed, sharing content that's just incredibly relatable. Bite-sized pieces, talking about, say, executive dysfunction, that struggle with planning, organizing, getting things done, or time blindness, which can be baffling, or even emotional dysregulation, handling intense feelings. They put words to these experiences in ways that just click for young people who felt that way but didn't know why.
And it feels like it's not just happening in a vacuum, right? There's this, perfect storm of factors speeding this whole thing up.
Absolutely.
I mean, think about the pandemic. It blew up routines, took away structures, and that really seemed to magnify executive function issues for teens suddenly doing online school or just living a totally different daily life.
That's a huge piece of it.
And then there's just more screen time.
Yeah.
Undeniably more, which for some maybe alters attention patterns or makes them more aware of their own focus struggles. It can even mimic some ADHD symptoms, can't it?
It certainly can. And you've hit on some really critical points there. But beyond that, we also have to talk about the real barriers to getting traditional help. Therapy, psychiatric services. They're often expensive. There's still stigma. And they're just not accessible for everyone, especially, for kids in marginalized communities.
Right. A huge gap.
It leaves a void, yeah. And social media, with all its flaws, kind of steps in to fill it. Plus, you have this growing awareness around neurodiversity.
Yes, that feels important too.
Empowering people to actually name and explore their cognitive differences. It's shifting sort of from seeing these things as just deficits to understanding them as different ways the brain can work.
And weaving through all of this online activity, there's something we haven't really explicitly named yet, but it's so powerful.
The algorithms.
The algorithms, exactly. They're just relentlessly designed to show you more of what you click on, what you watch. So a teen relates to one ADHD video. Boom. The algorithm serves up dozens more. It creates this echo chamber, this self-reinforcing loop.
Yeah, confirmation loop.
It's like the internet knows exactly what keeps you scrolling when you can't sleep. It's a really potent feedback system. And actually, this feels like a good moment as we're digging into how the digital world shapes things. If you want to keep exploring complex topics like this with us, do hit subscribe. And we genuinely love to hear your thoughts or experiences in the comments. It really does help build our community's understanding.
So thinking about why this content is so appealing, we have to remember adolescence itself. It's such a critical time for identity, for figuring out who you are. Teen brains are, they're wired to seek validation from peers, to try on different identities, and to wrestle with that feeling of being different. Everyone feels different sometimes in adolescence.
Yeah, that feeling of being misunderstood.
Exactly. And the online world offers this huge accessible space for all that exploration.
That's such a good point. It really shows how this ADHD content plugs directly into that deep need teens have. It gives them, like you said, a language for things they felt but couldn't articulate. That moment of, oh, that's why my mind races, or that's why I zone out.
Yeah.
It builds this incredible sense of community. I'm not alone. Thousands of others feel this way. And maybe the biggest thing, it offers relief from self-blame.
Huge relief.
Yeah, instead of I'm lazy, I'm flawed, it becomes, okay, maybe I'm not lazy. Maybe my brain works differently. Maybe there's a reason.
That shift away from shame, from internalizing blame, it's enormous. And think about teens who might be dealing with undiagnosed trauma,
Right.
or maybe grew up with chronic stress, inconsistent support. For them, an ADHD explanation can feel a lot safer, maybe more validating than other labels. Labels like depression or anxiety, which might carry more stigma for them.
That makes sense.
It's about finding a framework that explains their struggles without making it sound like a personal failure. It lets them say, it's not me failing, it's my brain being wired differently.
Which brings us to a really, really critical point, something that needs a lot of nuance, the overlap.
The symptom overlap.
It's exactly between ADHD symptoms and trauma responses. A trauma-informed perspective really helps here.
Absolutely.
Because so many behaviors that look like ADHD on the surface can actually be the brain's adaptations to trauma, especially things like childhood emotional neglect or abuse or just chronic dysregulation.
And it's not always an either situation, is it?
No, not at all. They can coexist. One can mask the other. It gets complicated.
And the specifics of that overlap are pretty striking when you look closely. For instance, distractibility in class, it could be ADHD. Or it could mirror hypervigilance from trauma, the brain scanning for danger instead of focusing. Or even dissociation.
Wow.
Emotional dysregulation, that's common in ADHD, right? Difficulty managing big feelings. But it can also be a direct result of unprocessed stress or attachment issues, where someone just never learned healthy coping skills.
So the outward behavior looks similar, but the root cause could be totally different.
Exactly. Impulsivity, too, could be an ADHD trait. Could also be that fight or flight nervous system kicking in.
Okay, I see the pattern. What about things like disorganization?
Yeah, disorganization could link to executive dysfunction from being stuck in chronic survival mode. The brain's prioritizing immediate safety, not long-term planning or tidiness.
Right. Survival first.
And rejection sensitivity, that intense fear of being criticized or left out. Very common with ADHD. But it can also stem directly from a history of being invalidated or abandoned or constantly criticized.
So it builds this deep-seated fear.
As some experts, like Dr. Janina Fisher, have pointed out, sometimes behaviors that really look like ADHD might actually be trauma adaptations in disguise.
That doesn't automatically mean someone doesn't have ADHD, though, right?
No, absolutely not. It just means a really careful, nuanced evaluation is essential to figure out what's what or how they might be interacting. You can't just assume based on a checklist of symptoms seen online.
Okay, so let's tackle a common question then. If a teen is watching these videos, identifying with them, wondering, is this me? Is it inherently bad for them to explore this idea of having ADHD via TikTok or Instagram?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And like most complex things, the answer isn't a simple yes or no.
Right.
From a psychological standpoint, that initial self-exploration, if it's done with curiosity, with care, it can actually be a really powerful first step towards self-awareness, maybe healing, even advocating for yourself.
So there are potential upsides to this initial online discovery phase.
Definitely. Think about the psychological benefits. Reduce self-blame, that huge relief we talked about. I'm not broken, I'm just different.
Liberating.
It can give them more agency, more motivation to seek actual support. It validates experiences they couldn't make sense of before. And it connects them with neurodivergent communities, which can combat isolation. Some psychologists talk about how naming something gives it shape. And once it has shape, you can hold it, you can work with it. It takes this vague sense of something's wrong with me and makes it something tangible to explore.
Okay, so that's the potential positive side.
Yeah.
But we have to be clear about the risks too, right? Because this online self-diagnosis isn't the same as a clinical assessment.
Not at all. And the clinical risks are significant. A major one is misattribution, meaning what looks like ADHD could actually be something else entirely: anxiety, depression, chronic sleep deprivation, or, as we discussed, an underlying trauma response. And those things need very different approaches.
Okay. So you risk treating the wrong thing or missing the real issue.
Precisely. Then there's confirmation bias. Remember those algorithms?
Yeah, feeding you more of what you already think.
Exactly, which can really reinforce a belief, whether it's accurate or not. It pulls you down a specific rabbit hole.
And that could lead to...
What?
Over-identifying with the label.
It can, yeah. Over-identification, where ADHD becomes your entire identity, maybe overshadowing all the other complex, wonderful parts of who you are.
I see. And other risks.
Missing comorbidities is a big one.
Co-occurring conditions.
Right. Things like OCD, autism spectrum disorder, PTSD, they often travel with ADHD, but they need their own specific support. A quick online self-diagnosis is likely to miss those nuances.
Okay.
And then, of course, the danger of inappropriate medication use. Trying stimulants without professional guidance, that carries serious health risks.
Got it. So the guiding principle should be what?
Explore the possibility, absolutely. Be curious, but don't assume the conclusion based only on social media.
Explore, don't conclude.
Huh.
I like that. This really leads us to look critically at the system itself, doesn't it? Why are teens turning online in the first place? Maybe traditional psychology, traditional mental health care has struggled to meet them where they are.
I think that's undeniable. Let's be honest, for many teens, the turn to social media happens because the existing systems have, well, failed them in certain ways.
How so? What are the biggest barriers?
Access is huge.
Yeah.
Just getting an evaluation. We're talking incredibly long waiting lists sometimes, months, even years. Then there's the cost. Therapy, assessments. They can be prohibitively expensive. Insurance barriers are complex and often leave families struggling to get coverage. Professional help is just out of reach for too many.
And it's not just about access, is it? There are issues with underdiagnosis, too.
Absolutely. ADHD is often missed or misdiagnosed in certain groups. Girls, for example, whose symptoms might be more internalized, less disruptive.
Right, not the stereotypical bouncing off the walls image.
Exactly. Also, youth from diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, LGBTQ+ teens, their symptoms might present differently or get misinterpreted through a narrow, culturally biased lens.
So the system itself hasn't always been good at seeing ADHD in everyone who has it.
That's fair to say. And sometimes traditional psychology has been perceived as, well, pathologizing rather than validating, especially for young people who don't quite fit the standard mold or whose experiences don't line up neatly with diagnostic criteria maybe developed for a different population.
I see. So that leaves this gap.
A crucial gap, yeah. And social media, for all its problems, steps in. It offers that sense of understanding, that community that might be missing elsewhere.
Okay. So knowing all this, the appeal, the risks, the system gaps, what does responsible self-discovery actually look like now? And how can we, adults, parents, teachers, clinicians, genuinely support young people?
Great questions. For teens navigating this online world, some therapist-backed advice is really key. First, stay curious, but not conclusive.
Explore, don't conclude. Back to that.
Exactly. Use the content like a mirror, something to reflect on. Does this really sound like me? Consistently, across different parts of my life, home, school, friends, not just in one specific situation, maybe journal about it.
Okay, good practical tip. What else?
Second, seek a professional assessment if you can. A proper evaluation is thorough. It involves detailed interviews, looking at your history, using rating scales.
And look for the right kind of professional.
Yes. Ideally, find clinicians or school psychologists who are neurodivergent affirming, who understand the nuances, who get that it doesn't always look the same in everyone.
Got it. Third,
explore other possible root causes. Don't just latch on to ADHD and stop looking. Could it be trauma, anxiety, sensory issues? Even chronic lack of sleep can mimic symptoms.
Right. It might be part of the picture, but not the whole story.
Exactly. ADHD might be there, but understanding the whole complex picture is vital.
Okay. And fourth,
avoid self-medicating. Seriously. ADHD meds can be life-changing when prescribed and monitored correctly by a professional.
but dangerous otherwise.
Very dangerous. Misusing them, taking them without oversight, big risks.
And finally,
Seek community, not just comparison. Find online spaces that normalize differences without turning struggles into, like, trendy labels. Choose communities that celebrate growth, strengths, resilience, not just symptoms.
that's really helpful advice for teens. Now, what about for the adults in their lives?
Yeah.
Parents, educators, therapists.
For us adults, I think the first step is to start blaming the teens, saying, oh, they're just misdiagnosing themselves on TikTok. That completely misses the point.
Yeah, it ignores the why.
It ignores the why. They're searching for understanding. They're seeking validation, often because the system hasn't provided it easily. So instead of pathologizing their search, listen.
Listen without judgment.
Without judgment. Validate their curiosity. Validate their distress. If they say, I think I have ADHD, don't shut it down. Ask why.
Ask open-ended questions.
Yes. Like, what specifically connects with you in that video? Or tell me more about how you've been feeling. How long has this been going on? And crucially, would you like help talking to someone about this professionally?
Offer practical help.
offer help accessing a proper, nuanced evaluation, and commit to learning ourselves staying informed about neurodiversity, about digital culture.
Because compassion builds trust.
Absolutely. Trust opens the door to real insight, to effective care, and ultimately to healing.
And I think it's so important to say this directly to the teens who might be listening. You are not faking it.
No.
Trying to understand yourself is brave. It's an act of self-discovery, even if the path starts online.
It really is. Keep learning, yes, but choose your sources wisely. Look for balanced, evidence-based information.
Don't just rely on viral videos.
Right. And really reflect. How do these challenges genuinely affect your daily life? Not just do they match a list online, but what's the impact? Reach out to a trusted adult, a school counselor, a therapist. Explore your strengths too. You are more than just your struggles.
So much more.
And remember, you are always, always more than any label.
And for parents, guardians, if your teen comes to you with this,
don't panic. First step. Listen. Ask them to share what they've learned and really listen to how they connect it to their own life.
be open to the possibility.
Be genuinely open to getting a clinical evaluation, even if it surprises you or challenges your view. And also consider the context. Family dynamics, past stress, current pressures. Could those be playing a role too?
It's about collaborative support, isn't it? Not shaming them.
Exactly. Collaborative, non-shaming support that empowers them on their journey.
When you step back, it feels like, in this complex, information-saturated world, teens are doing what people have always done. Trying to make sense of themselves, trying to connect.
This rise in online ADHD exploration, it's not just some fleeting internet trend. It really reflects a generation hungry for understanding, a generation tired of feeling shame about their internal world and ready to talk about it.
So where does that leave us? Where does psychology, where does mental health support need to go?
It needs to meet young people where they are, with solid science, yes, but also with deep empathy, with flexibility, and with genuine respect for their lived experience.
We need to give them the tools to explore their minds safely.
And provide those compassionate, well-informed pathways to support. When we do that, we empower them not just to cope, not just to survive, but to actually heal, grow, and thrive.
Because really, diagnosis, it shouldn't be about putting people in boxes, should it?
No, it should be about building bridges back to wholeness, bridges to understanding their own worth, bridges that help them find their authentic voice. Every young person does just that.
So maybe the question we leave you with is this. How can we, all of us, ensure that every young person trying to understand their own mind finds a path online or off that's compassionate, well-informed, and truly supportive?
How do we empower them to thrive in a world that often feels pretty overwhelming?
It's definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today.
Thanks for listening.
Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and please do share your thoughts in the comments below. We'll be back soon with more insights.